So in this video, we're going to talk about what it takes to buy a home as a millennial or young adult, if you want to put it that way. So we're going to cover a lot of really specific numbers, but in general, we're going to cover things like income, your credit score, assets, type of work, current debt, and so on. We're going to cover certain targets you need to hit and certain things that you need to think about every single day if you want to buy a home in the next 5 years. Okay, so anyways, let's get going here. So the targets you need to hit. So we're going to write down here targets. We're going to start off with, I'll mention just something you kind of need, some basic stuff you need. So this is assuming that you've been at the same job or have had some sort of employment for the last 2 years. So generally what banks like to see is that you have had the same job at the same income level for the past 2 years. And they're going to want to see your past 2 tax returns. That's generally what they like to see when you go in to apply for a mortgage, okay? So we're going to get that out of the way too. We're also going to get out of the way, so assets, for example, if you have $1 million in assets for some reason and you're a millionaire and you're a millennial, maybe your parents passed on or you inherited something, odds are you're going to be able to get a $200,000 mortgage if you have $1 million worth of assets. So that out of the way. Type of work. So for example, they discriminate against business owners. So business owners, they actually don't like giving mortgages to because there's no stability in it. They like to actually see employees when they lend you money. They like to see someone with a written contract saying, no matter what happens, you will get paid $70,000 this year, or $40,000, or $100,000. They don't like to see a small business owner or a business owner that's like, well, maybe I'll make $100 grand this year, or maybe I'll lose money. That's understandable from a lender's perspective. So there's that. And the last thing I want to get out of the way before we get into specifics is current debt. So if you have tons of debt, if you already have $200,000 in student loans or $100,000 in student loans, 5,000 credit cards, $15,000 auto loan, they don't like that. They don't like it when you have tons of other debt. So here's what I recommend is that if you have 2 sources of debt, which is kind of average for a millennial right now, if you have a student loan and an auto loan, pay one of those off first before applying for a mortgage. That's what I would say first. Try to do the old Dave Ramsey, rice and beans. Rice and beans, you got to attack that with gazelle intensity, that debt. So that's what I would recommend, is that if you have if you have 2 or more sources of debt, pay one of those off and then apply for a mortgage. So anyways, we're going to get into specifics here in terms of income and in terms of credit score. So they like to see your credit score here. Credit score. It is something they'll look at. It just means that it takes into account your debt and things like that, but it pretty much says how good are you at paying back the debt you have. Are you really good? Are you terrible? So your minimum that you need, your minimum credit score that you will need to apply for a normal mortgage is 580, which is not that high. I mean, it's not high at all. So 580 is the minimum credit score you'll need. Anything below that, you're probably going to have to go through some sort of weird mortgage process or you won't be able to get one. And so if your mortgage is below this, or if your mortgage is even at this, then you're going to have a higher interest rate because the bank doesn't trust you. Because you only have a 580 credit score, the bank doesn't trust you, so you're a little bit more riskier to lend money to, meaning that they're going to charge you a higher interest rate so that if you default on your loan, then they will still have probably recuperated a large portion of that money through interest payments. So I'll give you an example here of what that means. So 580 is the minimum credit score you need. It said that in terms of ideal for you to start applying for a mortgage, you need a credit score of around 700, which is, again, that's average. I think average for millennials, though, is somewhere around 660 or 650. I think I made a video on the 630, somewhere around there. And if you have anything above 800 plus is like, you don't even, then you're good. You're going to get the perfect rate. So, for example, 580 is usually a university student that's in a lot of debt that's made a few late payments. 700 is probably you have, a credit card, maybe some student loans. You paid them on time almost every time. Maybe you missed your credit cards twice, but you still paid them off a month later, okay? That's an example of what it would take to have a 700 credit score. 800, you make a lot of money, you've paid everything off on time, you have no debt. All right, that's like me, okay? So my credit score is about 810 right now, which is pretty good. And so that's the first thing you want to look at. Make sure you get this right before you go into a mortgage meeting, because if you have a 580 credit score, this is just a really rough example, by the way. A really, really, really rough example. So If you have a 580 credit score, the bank's probably going to want to lend you a mortgage at somewhere around, let's see an estimate here. I'll probably say somewhere around 4 to 5%. That's going to be the interest rate on your loan. That's high for right now. All right, so over here, 700, you're probably going to be able to get 3%, which is about the average mortgage rate right now. Then if you have a credit score of 800 plus, we're talking 2.5-ish. So just by having a good credit score, this is significant. That could be hundreds of dollars per month on your mortgage, $100, $200 per month on your mortgage, just by having a better credit score. So that's what I recommend first. First thing you got to do is attack your credit score. Now here's the main portion of this video. Here's the thing I want to talk about. Your income. Your income is the biggest determining factor as to if you can buy a home, how much home you can buy, how much the bank's willing to lend you. It's essentially all dependent on income, more specifically net income. They're going to look at stuff like so for example, if you make $100,000 and your expenses are $90,000, the bank's not going to like that. They're probably not going to lend you as much money as they would to someone who has $100,000 per year in income and they only spend about $60,000 in expenses. So keep that in mind, but these are just generic numbers. So we're going to move on here to the income. Here is a rough example. Whatever your yearly gross income is, multiply that number by roughly, we'll say 4.5. Multiply that number by 4.5, and that is the maximum amount of mortgage that a bank will be willing to lend you. This is a very rough number. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 3.5, sometimes it's 5. So for example, if I have $100,000, if I make $100,000 a year, and I can probably afford a maximum mortgage or maximum home price of about $450,000. Odds are a lot of banks are a little bit more restrictive, so odds are it's going to be closer to about $400,000 or maybe even $385,000, $400,000. It depends. There's a lot of variables, but that's just a really rough example. So if you make $200,000 per year, you're going to be able to afford, about a $900,000 house. If you make 50 grand a year, it's going to be about that's about $225,000 in terms of a mortgage price of a house. So that's a really rough example. So do that for whatever your income is, and that's the maximum house price you can afford. And a lot of you are probably a little bit nervous if you're making $40,000 a year and you want to buy a house in California. So we're going to move on here to some specifics. We're going to move on to the down payment actually. You know what? I'm going to erase this board and we're going to come right back. So another key factor in determining how to buy a house, how much house you can buy, is your down payment. And this is a really big problem these days for a lot of young people. So I'm going to break down specifically what you need to do each day to save up for a down payment and in certain states, in certain places in the world. So we're going to break it down for how to save up for a down payment in a place like, hopefully this board's a little bit dry now, in California, in Cali. All right, in California, so the average list price, the average house price in California is $600,000, and that is not a 6, is about $689K, about $689,000. It's a decent chunk of change. So your down payment that you would need for this place, you need about a 20% down payment most of the time. Sometimes you can get 5%, but we're going to stick to 20% here. 20% down payment, so you'll need $137,000 down. Again, that's a pretty big chunk of change here. So how much money do you need to save up every day to do that? This is where most people are going to get lost here. Now I'll talk about how much income you need to get there. So down payment $137K, meaning that you need to save about $75 a day. Now, to a lot of you watching this, you're going to get scared off now. $75 a day. I mean, there's some of you out there that are only making $75 a day. Some of you are less. Some of you are more. But $75 a day is what you need to save after taxes to afford a down payment on a house in California. And do that every day for 5 years. 5 years you need to do that before you can afford a down payment. So, and the income you would need, take a guess. This is for the average house in California, by the way. The average house, you need an income of about 160K. Oh, and that's a bad K, but we're going to pretend that's K. 160K. Oh, there we go. That's a little bit better. So what do you guys think? What do you guys think about that? This is the average price. So this is including places in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, downtown LA, Malibu, but it's also including parts that I don't even know the names of that a lot of people live in, where most people live in, the suburbs that are a little bit down, right? The places with about 250K houses or 400K houses. So this is just the average home. It's not the entry level. This is the average home. We're going to move on here to another state. So California has the second most expensive list price homes in the United States. The number one is actually Hawaii, but we're not going to cover that. Hawaii is completely different. Their average home price is 900K, so we're not going to go there. But we're going to go to Kansas. See, Kansas is going to represent all the flyover states. I didn't even know that was actually named for places in the United States. I'm from Canada. I didn't know about that until a few years ago, until my American friend told me. Oh yeah, all those are flyover states. You either go to New York or California, and that's it. Or Florida sometimes, or Florida. So Kansas, the average list price there is 189K. Substantially less. Substantially less. I mean, in my area, we're going to talk about my area next, okay, and how ridiculous it is for young people. But 189K, I mean, I could do that right now. Even though I haven't had consecutive small business income years for 2 years, I could probably get a mortgage for that right now if I really wanted to. So $189,000. Down payment is 37K. Again, that's not bad. 37K. How much would you need to save up every single day for that 37K? Well, you would need to save up roughly about $21 a day over 5 years. That's it. 21 bucks a day over 5 years. That's not bad. That's just not eating lunch, not eating an expensive lunch, and not going out to eat for dinner once a week. And you can have a down payment on a place in Kansas. So this is just talking about Kansas, Missouri, all those places where home prices are really low. And so the income you need is 45K for the average house in Kansas. Again, that's a pretty good deal. So now I'm going to write this up here, what it takes for my area. So my area, if I were to buy in my area that I currently live in, here's the crazy statistics. We're talking San Francisco-like numbers here. Okay, here it is. My area, I'm going to write it up here. Average price. Anyone want to take a guess? Well, if you've been a subscriber, you know it's about 1.2 million. And in this entire city, there's there's got to be about 200,000 people living here now. About 150 to 200,000 people here living now. So the average home price is $1.2 million here. Insane. All right, so the down payment, roughly, just doing some quick math, is roughly about 250K. You'd also need an income of about 250K. How much would you need to save every day? You would need to save about $137 a day over 5 years. I think the math on that works out, right? I think the math on that works out. It could be a little bit off here. $137. No, I think that's about right. $137 a day over 5 years. We're going to say that's correct. So that is what you need to do in your area, what incomes you need, how much you need to save in order to buy an average priced home in certain areas in the world. And I'm essentially in Toronto, California. So perspective, income here in my area, 250K is minimum. California, roughly, what is the number, 160K. Kansas, 45K. These are for average priced homes. They're not for lower income places. They're not for entry levels. But I just thought I would make this video because people don't really realize certain things. Like people think that if you have a 40K a year job, you can afford to have, a $400,000 home. And it doesn't work like that. That's called subprime mortgages, and they don't do those anymore. Those are not good. And also, you need a few other things. You need to pay attention to your credit score. You really need to pay attention to that, because that can get you a better interest rate just by doing that. And also, I don't know, how many of you are close to buying a home right now? I'm really, really curious. How many of you are close? So leave a comment down below. Are any of you want to buy a home in the next 2-3 years? Maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years or so? And are you guys okay with saving up this much money for a down payment? Now, I do recommend putting 20% down in all cases. I know that you can get a 5% first-time home buyer's loan, but for your future, that is not necessarily a good thing. You want to keep those debt payments as low as possible. 20% solid. Now, if you own a small business in Canada, or Ontario specifically, a lot of the times you need a 30% down payment because they discriminate against people that don't have contracts. So I want you to all keep this in mind. All of these things, the income you need, credit score, so on, when you go looking for your first house. So I think that's going to wrap this video up. What do you guys think? Are you guys close to buying your first house? What's your income? Can you afford $1 million house? Oh, hopefully I'll be buying one of those sooner rather than later, but apparently I have to wait for 1 more year. We'll see what happens. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. You're all very beautiful people, and I'll see you guys in the next video.